The frontier world of Valora was not a place humans usually visited. It was a land of towering crystal spires, glowing rivers, and skies filled with strange shifting lights. The air smelled faintly of metal and spice, and the people who lived there, tall, graceful beings with silver eyes and skin that shimmered like stone, called themselves the Valoran. Daniel Cross was not supposed to stand out on this strange planet. He was just an engineer, a simple man sent as part of the first human delegation. His job was to keep the machines running at the outpost, fix broken tools, and stay out of politics. The humans were new to the stars, still learning about the old and powerful civilizations that ruled them. But fate had other plans for him. Daniel had just finished repairing a power generator when the outpost commander called him. "Cross," the commander said. "You're needed at the palace immediately." Daniel frowned. "The palace? Why would the royal palace want me?" The commander shrugged. "Don't ask me." The message only said the princess herself demanded a human engineer. "Congratulations, you've just been promoted to royal mechanic." Daniel wiped the grease from his hands and tried not to laugh. It had to be a mistake. A human summoned by alien royalty? It sounded like the start of a bad story. But orders were orders. The palace of Valora was carved directly into a mountain of violet crystal. Tall gates opened into halls that sparkled like frozen starlight. Everywhere Daniel looked, alien guards stood in polished armor, holding spears that hummed faintly with energy. Their eyes followed him as he walked, making it clear that humans were still strangers here. He was brought into a grand chamber where a young woman waited. She was unlike any alien he had seen. Her silver eyes burned with intelligence, and her hair, dark and flowing, was tied with strands of glowing metal. Her clothing was part robe, part armor, marked with symbols Daniel could not read. This was Princess Lysera of Valora. She looked at Daniel not with disdain, but with curiosity. "You are the human engineer?" she asked, her voice smooth yet commanding. Daniel bowed awkwardly. "Yes, Your Highness." "Daniel Cross, what do you need me for?" Without another word, Lysera stepped aside and gestured. On a stand before her rested a piece of ornate battle gear. It looked like a helmet, half crown and half machine, covered with silver plating and glowing veins of crystal. But the crown was cracked. One side had broken away, wires and crystal threads spilling out like torn veins. "My crown of accord," Lysera said softly. "It has failed," Daniel blinked. "Crown of accord? It is a relic of my people, a bond between ruler and realm. Without it, I cannot lead the High Council. I asked for you because your kind sees differently. Where our engineers failed, perhaps your hands may succeed." Daniel stared at the broken crown. It was beautiful, but also strange, half art, half machine. He wasn't sure if this was an honor or a trap. But Lysera's eyes held no mockery. "Only hope. I'll try," Daniel said at last. "But I can't promise anything. Human tools and methods may not match your technology." Lysera tilted her head. "That is exactly why I asked for you. Sometimes only an outsider can see the hidden flaw." Daniel knelt by the stand, studying the crown. His fingers traced the cracks, the broken strands of crystal, the scorched metal. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary machine. Wires, circuits, power nodes. But the more he looked, the more he realized it wasn't built like anything he knew. The circuits curved like veins in a leaf. The metal plates were not just shields but resonators, humming faintly like music. He muttered to himself as he worked. "Strange. It's not broken by force. It burned out. Too much energy, maybe? But why?" Lysera watched closely. "Our best smiths replaced the parts, but each attempt failed." "That's the problem," Daniel said, pointing. "This isn't a part you can replace. This section here," he tapped the cracked crystal, "isn't just decoration. It regulates the energy. If you use the wrong crystal, the whole system overheats. Whoever repaired it before didn't notice that." The princess's eyes widened slightly. "You see it?" "Sure," Daniel said, already pulling a small toolkit from his belt. "I think I can jury-rig a stabilizer. Won't be pretty, but it should hold," the guards whispered among themselves as Daniel worked. A human touching the sacred crown? To them it looked almost insulting. But Lysera silenced them with a single gesture. She did not take her eyes off the engineer. Daniel cut away the burnt crystal and replaced it with a shard of simple glass from his kit. He then wrapped fine copper wire around it, bending it into shape with a small plier. To the aliens it looked crude, almost childish. But when he connected the wires and reset the circuit, The crown gave a low, steady hum. The broken glow inside the crystal veins began to pulse again, weak but alive. "There," Daniel said, stepping back. "It's not perfect, but it's working." Lysera lifted the crown gently. The glow spread across its surface, steady and strong. For the first time in weeks, the relic was alive. She placed it on her head, and the entire chamber filled with a soft resonance, like the echo of 1,000 voices singing in harmony. The guards fell silent. The princess smiled. Small, but real. "You have done what none of my people could. You restored the crown of accord." Daniel scratched his neck awkwardly. Honestly, it wasn't magic. Just noticing the flaw. "Anyone could have done it." "No," Lysera said firmly. "Not anyone. Only someone who sees with different eyes." As the hum of the crown filled the chamber, a strange weight fell over the room. The alien guards bowed deeply. The chamber doors opened and members of the High Council entered, their robes trailing behind them. Their silver eyes swept the scene, then rested on Daniel. One counselor hissed, "A human touched the sacred relic?" But Lysera raised her hand. "This human restored it. His skill is now recorded by the crown itself." Daniel blinked. "Recorded? What do you mean?" Lysera looked at him with a faint smile, a glimmer of mischief in her eyes. "The crown of accord does not only bind ruler to realm, it also binds ruler to the one who proves worthy to mend it." Daniel froze. Wait, are you saying—" The princess stepped forward. Her voice rang clear across the chamber. "This human, Daniel Cross, is now bound by the crown. By our law, he is recognized as my chosen consort." The hall erupted in gasps and whispers. The counselors looked shocked, the guards stiffened, and Daniel nearly dropped his toolkit. "Consort?" he sputtered. No, wait, I just fixed a broken helmet." But Lysera's eyes sparkled with amusement. "You did more than that. You proved human hands can heal what alien hands could not. You may deny the title, Daniel Cross, but the crown does not." The chamber was alive with tension. Half the council seemed outraged. The other half seemed intrigued. The guards did not know whether to bow to Daniel or push him out. Daniel stood frozen, his mind spinning. He had only wanted to fix a machine, but now he was part of something far larger, something he didn't understand. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the confusion and panic, he felt the first spark of something else, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, this broken crown had changed more than one destiny today. The chamber of the palace still echoed with the soft hum of the crown of accord. The glow from the relic cast long shadows across the crystal walls, painting the faces of the counselors in pale light. Everyone stared at Daniel Cross, the human engineer who had done the impossible. Daniel, for his part, wished he could disappear. He wasn't used to so many eyes on him, and he certainly wasn't used to being called consort by an alien princess. His hands itched to reach for his toolkit, to distract himself with wires and circuits, but there was no escaping the attention now. One of the counselors, an old alien with robes that shimmered like flowing water, stepped forward. His voice was low and sharp. "This is a violation of custom. A human cannot be bound to the crown. It is unthinkable." Lysera, the princess, stood tall beside Daniel. The crown glowed on her head, its crystal veins pulsing in rhythm with her words. "It is not for us to decide. The crown has spoken. He restored it when no one else could." "That is proof enough." The chamber erupted in arguments. Some counselors shouted that the relic was tricked into working. Others whispered that perhaps this was fate. The guards remained tense, their hands gripping their weapons but not raising them. Daniel raised a hand weakly. Maybe I should explain? I didn't mean to interfere in your customs. I just saw a broken system and fixed it. That's what I do." Lysera turned her gaze on him, her silver eyes softening. "And yet in doing so, you passed the trial." Daniel blinked. "Trial? What trial?" "Nobody told me there was a test going on." The old counselor's eyes narrowed. "He does not even know what he has done." Lysera's lips curved into the faintest smile. "That is what makes it true." Later that evening, Daniel found himself walking with Lysera through the palace gardens. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of glowing flowers that swayed as if moved by an invisible wind. Above them, the night sky was alive with shifting bands of color, like curtains of light dancing across the heavens. Daniel was still overwhelmed. "So let me get this straight," he said, rubbing his forehead. "That crown isn't just some fancy piece of gear. It's a sacred relic." "A test?" Lysera nodded, Her voice was calm, but her eyes held a spark of pride. The crown of accord is more than a relic. It is our measure of worth. For centuries, every ruler of Velora has placed it before their chosen allies and suitors. Many attempted to repair it. All failed. You succeeded. Daniel frowned. But I didn't even know I was being tested. That is why it matters, Lysera said. She stopped walking and turned to face him. The crown glowed faintly on her brow, its light mingling with the starlight. Anyone who knows they are tested may act to impress, but you acted with honesty, with focus only on the work itself. That is the true measure of worth. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Look, I appreciate the compliment, but I'm not some hero. I'm just a guy who knows how to tinker with machines. If your people think I'm something more, they're mistaken. Lysera studied him silently for a moment, then smiled. Perhaps that humility is what makes you worthy. The next day, Daniel discovered that news traveled fast on Velora. Everywhere he went in the palace, servants and guards whispered about the human consort. Some looked at him with curiosity, others with open suspicion. A few even bowed slightly as he passed, though Daniel quickly begged them not to. He spent most of the morning in the palace workshop, surrounded by alien tools and machines he didn't fully understand. Working helped calm his nerves. But even there, whispers followed him. 2 guards stood by the doorway speaking in low voices. He should not wear the title, one muttered. The crown chose him, the other replied. Perhaps we should watch before we judge. Daniel sighed. It seemed no matter where he went, the title of consort clung to him like an unwanted shadow. By midday, Lysera summoned him to a council gathering. The chamber was filled with high-ranking nobles and elders, their eyes sharp and their voices sharper. Daniel felt like he had stepped into a storm. The old counselor from before rose to his feet. His robe shimmered as he lifted a hand. Princess Lysera, he said, this human's success is a trick. The relic was deceived. I demand proof of his worth. Lysera's eyes flashed. The crown itself accepted his repair. What further proof could there be? But the old counselor sneered. Then let him prove himself again. Let him face the trial of challenge, as all chosen consorts must. Daniel's stomach dropped. Trial of challenge? That sounds bad. Lysera's voice softened, but only slightly. It is not usually deadly. It is a contest of skill and mind, to show the chosen consort's value. If you refuse, the council will say the crown was tricked. They will strip your recognition. Daniel swallowed hard. So, I don't really have a choice. Lysera placed a hand lightly on his arm. I will guide you. Do not fear. The trial was held that evening in a great hall. Rows of aliens filled the seats, their silver eyes glowing in the dim light. At the center of the chamber stood a platform, upon which rested a series of machines and puzzles. Some were simple mechanical devices, others complex alien constructs that Daniel had never seen before. Lord Zaith, a tall and proud noble with armor plated in gold, stood on the opposite side of the platform. His voice rang out across the hall. If this human is truly worthy, let him face me. Let him prove his mind and his hands. The crowd roared in agreement. Daniel rubbed his palms nervously. I'm really starting to regret touching that crown. Lysera's voice carried across the platform, calm and steady. Remember what you are. Not a warrior. Not a noble. An engineer. See what others do not see. The trial began. Seath strode to the first puzzle, a mechanical lock of shifting gears. His hands moved quickly, and within moments the device clicked open. The crowd cheered. Daniel stepped to his own puzzle, a small cube covered in glowing patterns. He turned it in his hands, frowning. The patterns shifted when pressed, but they didn't seem to follow any logic. Then he noticed faint scratches around one of the buttons, signs of repeated use. Smiling faintly, he pressed that button twice, then twisted the cube. The whole device lit up and unfolded into a star-shaped sculpture. The crowd gasped. Zaith's eyes narrowed. Puzzle after puzzle followed. Zaith relied on strength, forcing pieces into place, bending parts to make them fit. Daniel relied on observation. He noticed tiny cracks, subtle misalignments, small details others ignored. With each success, the crowd grew louder, split between disbelief and awe. Finally, the last challenge appeared, a broken energy node, humming dangerously with unstable power. Sparks leapt from it, and even the guards stepped back. Zaith smirked. Let us see if the human dares touch this. Daniel studied it carefully. The energy wasn't stable, but the design was familiar, almost too familiar. He realized with a shock that the same flaw he had seen in the crown existed here too. The wrong kind of crystal, forcing the system to overload. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a shard of simple glass from his toolkit, the same trick he had used before. With steady hands, he replaced the crystal and reconnected the wires. The node steadied, glowing with a calm, even light. The hall fell silent, then erupted in cheers. Lizera stepped forward, her eyes shining with pride. The trial is complete. The crown was not deceived. Daniel Cross has proven his worth. Daniel exhaled in relief, his knees weak. He glanced at the crowd, who now looked at him with something new, not just suspicion, but respect. But in the back of the hall, Lord Zeeth's face was dark with anger. His eyes burned with silent promise. The trial may have ended, but the conflict had only begun, and Daniel knew it. That night, as the stars shifted above the palace, Daniel sat in the quiet garden with Lysera. The air was still, the flowers glowing softly in the dark. "I don't get it," Daniel admitted. "Why me? Why did the crown choose me? I'm just human." Lysera looked at him, her expression calm but unreadable. Perhaps that is exactly why. The crown seeks what is different. What can change us? What we do not see in ourselves. Daniel looked away, staring at the glowing rivers below the palace. Feels less like being chosen and more like being trapped. Perhaps both, Lysera said softly. But remember this, Daniel Cross. Every great destiny begins as a burden. Only later does it show its true shape. Her words lingered in the night air, heavy with meaning. Daniel didn't know what future the crown had bound him to, but he felt it in his bones. This was only the beginning. The palace of Velora had never been so alive with whispers. Everywhere Daniel Cross went, he felt the weight of eyes following him. Servants paused in their duties to steal glances. Guards stood straighter when he passed, and nobles leaned close to one another, murmuring about the human consort. Daniel didn't like it. He wasn't built for attention. Back on Earth, he was just another engineer, fixing broken machines no one else wanted to touch. Now he was the center of alien politics, and he wasn't sure if he would survive it. But Princess Lysera seemed calm, even amused. She walked through the palace halls with quiet confidence, the crown of accord glowing faintly on her brow. When people bowed to her, she accepted it with grace. When they looked at Daniel with suspicion, she met their gaze until they turned away. "You're taking this well," Daniel muttered as they walked through a long corridor of crystal arches. Lysera's lips curved slightly. "I have been raised to face the eyes of a court. You, Daniel Cross, are new to this. But do not mistake your unease for weakness. It is natural." Daniel sighed. "Natural or not, I feel like a mouse trapped in a room full of cats." She tilted her head. "Then learn how to survive among cats." That evening, the High Council gathered once more. The great chamber glowed with firelight from tall braziers, and the air was heavy with tension. Nobles in shimmering robes filled the seats, their silver eyes gleaming as they watched the princess and her human consort take their places. Lord Zeeth was already waiting. He stood in the center of the chamber, tall and broad, his armor gleaming with gold plating. His face was sharp, his eyes cold with fury. When Daniel entered, Zeeth's voice rang out. "This cannot stand. A human cannot walk beside our princess as consort. It is an insult to our traditions." The crowd murmured in agreement. Some nodded. Others waited silently, curious to see what would unfold. Lysera's voice was clear and strong. "The crown chose him. The trials proved him. You have no right to deny what has been sealed." Zeeth's eyes narrowed. "Then let us test him in the oldest way of all. By challenge." The chamber erupted in gasps. Daniel froze. "Challenge? Wait, hold on. What kind of challenge are we talking about here?" Zeeth pointed directly at him. "You will face me. Before the court, before the people. If you win, I will yield, and the crown's choice will stand. If you lose, you will be cast out, and your bond to the princess will be broken." Daniel's mouth went dry. "Yeah, that sounds like a terrible idea. I'm not exactly built for duels." Lysera stepped forward, her voice sharp. "This is madness. He is not a warrior." "That is the point," Zeeth sneered. "He is unworthy, and I will prove it." That night Daniel paced his chamber restlessly. His thoughts were a storm. How could he fight a man like Zeeth? The alien was taller, stronger, and trained in combat since childhood. Daniel had no sword, no armor, no training. All he had was a toolkit and a knack for noticing details others missed. Lizera entered quietly, her presence calming the room. She studied him for a long moment. "You're afraid," she said softly. "Of course I'm afraid." Daniel burst out. "He's twice my size. He's a warrior, and I'm just me." Lizera placed a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was steady, grounding. "Then do not try to be what you are not." "You cannot beat him with strength." "But strength is not the only way to win." Daniel looked at her, confused. "What else is there?" Her silver eyes shone in the dim light. "You are human. You think differently. You see flaws where others see perfection. Use that, outwit him." Daniel swallowed hard. "Outwit him. With what, a wrench?" Lizera smiled faintly. "If that is your weapon, then wield it well." The next day, the challenge was held in the grand arena. Thousands of Valorans gathered to watch. The arena was a wide circle of stone, lit by glowing crystal torches. Above, banners waved in the alien wind, and the sound of drums echoed through the air. Daniel stood at one end of the arena, dressed in simple clothes, clutching a small toolkit hidden at his belt. At the other end stood Zaith, armored in gold, holding a long spear that crackled with energy. The crowd roared his name, their voices a wall of sound. Daniel's stomach churned. He whispered to himself, "This is insane." "This is absolutely insane," the horn sounded. The challenge began. Seath charged forward, spear flashing. Daniel barely rolled aside in time, the weapon striking the ground with a burst of sparks. The crowd cheered. Daniel scrambled to his feet, heart pounding. He knew he couldn't fight head-on. He needed to stall, to think, to observe. Zaith swung again, the spear slicing through the air. Daniel ducked behind a stone pillar, the weapon slamming into it with a loud crack. Sparks flew, and Daniel's eyes widened as he noticed something. The energy from the spear caused the stone to resonate, leaving small fractures. "Interesting," Daniel muttered. He pulled a coil of wire from his toolkit, quickly wrapping it around the base of the pillar. As Zaith pulled his spear free, Daniel darted to another pillar, repeating the process. The crowd murmured in confusion, wondering what the human was doing. Zaith laughed coldly. "You think you can run forever?" Daniel shouted back, "Not forever. Just long enough." The duel became a strange game of cat and mouse. Zaith chased Daniel across the arena, striking pillars and walls, while Daniel darted from place to place, laying wires, connecting tools, and setting up small devices from his kit. Finally, when half the arena was laced with his makeshift setup, Daniel shouted, "Hey, Zaith, over here!" The noble charged, his spear glowing brighter. Daniel waited until the last moment, then ducked aside. Zaith's spear slammed into a pillar Daniel had wired. The energy surged through the wires, racing across the arena in a bright flash. The pillars resonated together, creating a deep, vibrating hum. The ground shook and the spear in Zaith's hands overloaded, sparking wildly before shorting out. The crowd gasped. Zaith stared at his weapon in shock, the gold plating scorched. He turned to Daniel, fury in his eyes. "What trick is this?" Daniel shrugged, breathing hard. "Not a trick, just engineering." With his weapon disabled, Zaith charged with his fists. Daniel had no choice but to dodge, stumbling and rolling out of the way. He wasn't fast, but he was desperate. Each time Zaith struck, Daniel used the environment, ducking behind pillars, throwing sand in his eyes, even tripping him with a loose coil of wire. The crowd roared with every exchange. At first they had mocked the human, but now they shouted in surprise and even admiration. Finally, Zaith lunged in rage, his balance off. Daniel sidestepped and shoved him lightly, sending the larger man crashing to the ground. The arena went silent. Zaith struggled to rise, but Daniel pressed the end of a broken tool against his throat. Not a weapon, but enough to make the point clear. Breathing heavily, Daniel said, "Looks like I win." The silence broke into thunderous cheers. The crowd erupted, some shouting Daniel's name, others roaring in disbelief. For the first time, the people of Valora had seen a human outwit one of their greatest warriors. Lysera stepped into the arena, her crown glowing brightly. She looked at Daniel with pride. "You fought as yourself," she said softly. "And you won." Daniel wiped sweat from his brow. "Barely," but Zaith's eyes burned with hatred as guards pulled him away. This was not over. The rival had been humiliated, and he would not forget it. Daniel felt it deep in his chest. This victory was only the beginning of something far more dangerous. That night, as the arena quieted and the palace grew still, Daniel sat alone in his chamber. The roar of the crowd still echoed in his ears. He had survived the challenge, but he knew his place in Velora was still fragile. He looked at his hands, still trembling from the fight, and whispered, "What am I even doing here?" But somewhere in the shadows of the palace, Lord Zeeth plotted his revenge. And soon Daniel would face a threat not just to himself, but to the entire kingdom. The palace of Velora stood silent under the strange shifting sky. After the duel in the arena, Daniel Cross had thought the tension might finally ease. He had proven himself before the crowd, outwitted Lord Zeeth, and earned at least a measure of respect. But peace never lasted long. Daniel spent the following days repairing small machines around the palace, trying to avoid attention. He wanted things to go back to normal, though he knew normal no longer existed for him. Wherever he went, people still whispered. Some bowed slightly, acknowledging him as the princess's chosen consort. Others looked at him with anger or distrust, waiting for him to fail. Lysera remained calm as always. She wore the crown of accord proudly, and whenever she entered a room, her presence commanded silence. To Daniel, she was steady as a mountain, but he could see the pressure building around her. "You've made enemies," she said one evening as they walked through the glowing gardens. "Zeeth was humiliated. He will not rest until he takes revenge, and there are others who see you as a threat to their power." Daniel sighed. "Great, so I'm not only an accidental consort, I'm also a target." Lysera's silver eyes softened. "Do not let fear rule you. Fear blinds. You must see clearly as you always have." Daniel nodded, though the weight on his shoulders grew heavier. The next night, the attack came. Daniel was in the palace workshop, examining a strange alien device that looked like a mix between a clock and a compass. He had just managed to coax a faint glow from it when alarms shattered the quiet. Sirens wailed, echoing through the crystal halls. A guard burst in. "Enemy fleet! They've breached the skies." Daniel's heart stopped. He dropped the device and rushed to the balcony. In the distance, the night sky burned with fire. Dozens of dark ships cut across the heavens, their engines roaring. Explosions lit the horizon as defense towers fired beams of light upward, but too many enemy ships slipped through. The siege of shadows had begun. Chaos spread through the palace. Guards rushed to their posts, servants fled to hidden shelters, and counselors shouted orders no one seemed to follow. Daniel was swept along in the tide of panic until Lysera appeared, her presence cutting through the storm like a blade. "Daniel," she called, striding toward him, her crown glowing fiercely. "The palace defenses are failing. We need the command systems online or the city will fall." Daniel swallowed hard. "You're asking me?" "You're the only one who sees the flaws," Lysera said. "You repaired the crown. You passed the trial. You must do this." Daniel wanted to argue, but there was no time. Already the sky shook with thunder as enemy ships fired upon the city. He nodded quickly. "Show me the way." The command center of the palace was a cavern of crystal screens and glowing control panels. Engineers and soldiers worked frantically, but nothing responded. Systems flickered and died. Weapons refused to fire, and shields collapsed one by one. Daniel hurried to a console, scanning the displays. His eyes widened. It was the same problem he had seen before. The same flaw as the crown, the same flaw as the trial puzzles. The Valoran systems were beautiful but fragile. They demanded perfection. A single wrong piece, a single cracked crystal, and the whole network collapsed. "Your system's choking on itself," Daniel muttered. "You've built everything too fine, too precise. One tiny error and everything breaks." Lysera stood beside him. "Can you fix it?" Daniel hesitated. He wasn't sure. But if he didn't try, the city was doomed. "I'll need copper wire, scrap metal, and anything that can conduct energy," he said quickly. The guards stared at him like he was insane. "Scrap metal? In the middle of a siege?" Lysera didn't blink. "Get him what he asks for." As enemy ships rained fire on the city, Daniel tore into the palace's defense systems. He bypassed elegant circuits and replaced them with crude loops of copper. He ripped out fragile crystals and jammed in shards of glass and stone. He rerouted energy through patched wires that sparked and smoked. To the Valoran engineers, it looked like madness. To Daniel, it was survival. One by one, the defense towers flickered back to life. Beams of light roared into the sky, striking enemy ships and sending them crashing into the ground below. The palace shield surged weakly, then grew stronger as Daniel stabilized the flow. The command center erupted in cheers. Daniel sagged against the console, his hands shaking. "It's holding." "For now." Lysera's eyes shone. "You turned failure into strength. No one else could have done this." But the battle was not over. Suddenly, the command center doors exploded inward. A squad of enemy soldiers stormed inside, their armor dark and jagged, their weapons humming with cruel energy. The Valoran guards clashed with them, but more enemies poured through the halls. Daniel ducked behind a console as beams of light streaked overhead. He wasn't a fighter, but he wasn't helpless either. His eyes darted across the room, noticing details others missed. The flickering lights above, the cracked floor beneath the enemy's boots. He grabbed a loose wire sparking on the ground and yanked it free. With a quick motion, he threw it into a puddle of spilled coolant. Electricity surged across the floor, shocking the nearest enemy soldiers. They collapsed, twitching, their weapons clattering to the ground. Lysera's blade flashed in the chaos. She moved like liquid silver, striking down foes with precision. The sight of her, crown blazing, gave the defenders strength. Together they forced the remaining enemies back. For a moment, the command center was theirs again. But Daniel knew this was only the first wave. The enemy fleet still raged outside. The palace shook with explosions as more ships landed across the city. He turned to Lysera, breathing hard. "We can't just defend. They'll overwhelm us. We need to cut off their control." Her eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Daniel pointed to the skies. "Those ships are too coordinated. They've got a central command probably hidden among them. If we can disrupt it, the fleet falls into chaos." Lysera studied him, then nodded slowly. "Then we strike at their heart." That night, as the city burned and the enemy pressed closer, Daniel stood aboard a small strike vessel beside Lysera and her most loyal guards. The plan was simple but dangerous. Slip through the chaos, find the enemy command ship and destroy its control systems. Daniel gripped the railing nervously as the ship soared into the sky. Fire and smoke filled the air, the glow of burning towers casting eerie light across the city below. Enemy ships loomed like shadows, their weapons blazing. "Remind me why I agreed to this?" Daniel muttered. Lysera's lips curved faintly. "Because you are braver than you think." The ship dodged blasts of energy, weaving through the enemy fleet. Daniel's heart pounded. He wasn't a soldier, but he had something the enemy didn't: human adaptability. And for the first time, he believed it might be enough. Ahead, the enemy command ship loomed, massive and dark, its surface covered in jagged armor. Daniel's breath caught. This was it, the heart of the invasion, and if they failed here, Valora would fall. The strike vessel rattled as it approached the massive enemy flagship. Fire streaked across the sky, and every second felt like the end. Daniel cross-gripped the railing so tightly his knuckles turned white. He was no soldier, no warrior, but somehow he had ended up at the very center of this war. Princess Lysera stood tall beside him, her crown glowing faintly as if it drew strength from her resolve. Her guards prepared their weapons, silent but steady. They all knew this mission was dangerous, yet none of them hesitated. Daniel swallowed hard. "So just to be clear, our plan is to sneak inside the biggest enemy ship in the sky, disable its systems, and hope everything falls apart?" Lysera glanced at him, her silver eyes calm. "That is the plan." Daniel let out a shaky laugh. "Great, no pressure." The enemy flagship loomed ahead, a mountain of jagged steel against the burning horizon. Smaller ships swarmed around it like insects, firing at anything that drew near. The strike vessel weaved between bursts of energy fire, slipping closer under cover of chaos. When they reached the underside of the massive ship, Lysera raised her hand. "Now!" With a hiss, the strike vessel latched onto the enemy hull. A circular hatch cut its way through the metal, and the boarding ramp extended with a clang. Daniel's pulse raced. He followed Lysera and the guards through the breach, stepping into the belly of the beast. Inside, the ship felt alive. The walls pulsed faintly, as though made of some mix of metal and flesh. Strange blue light flowed through veins in the structure. The air was hot, heavy with the hum of alien machinery. Daniel's instincts screamed at him to turn back, but he pushed forward. He reminded himself that without this mission, the city below would fall. Lysera led the way, her steps sure. "The command core will be at the heart of the ship. Stay close." They moved quickly through winding corridors. Enemy soldiers appeared, their armor black and sharp-edged. The guards clashed with them in bursts of steel and light while Daniel kept low, scanning the walls. His eyes searched for weaknesses, for anything he could use. Everywhere he looked, he saw the same pattern, the same flaw he had noticed in the crown, in the palace defenses. The enemy's technology was powerful but delicate, too precise. One wrong piece could send the whole system crashing. At last they reached a vast chamber glowing with blue energy. In the center stood the command core, a towering column of crystal and circuitry that pulsed like a beating heart. Around it, alien officers worked furiously, their hands moving across strange consoles. "This is it," Lysera whispered. The guards surged forward to engage the officers, while Daniel rushed to the core. He pressed his hands against the glowing surface, feeling the vibration. It was like touching a living creature. "All right," he muttered. "Let's see if I can break you the same way I fixed your cousins." He scanned the core, tracing its flow of energy. He saw where the streams converged, where they overloaded the fragile circuits. He needed to push it past its limit to make it collapse on itself, but how? Then he remembered the copper wires and scrap metal in the palace. He didn't have those here, but he had something else, his toolkit strapped to his belt. He pulled out a small cutting torch and a bundle of simple earth-made wire. Compared to alien technology, it was laughably crude. But crude was exactly what he needed. As Lysera fought at his back, Daniel jammed the wires into the crystal seams. Sparks flew, the hum of the core deepening to a dangerous pitch. He cut across circuits with the torch, forcing the energy to reroute chaotically. The core flickered. The entire ship shuddered violently. One of the alien officers screamed something in their guttural tongue, rushing toward Daniel. Lysera intercepted with a swift strike, her blade flashing bright. "Hurry!" she shouted. "I'm trying." Daniel yelled back. Sweat dripped into his eyes as he worked frantically. He could feel the core fighting him, resisting. The glow brightened, threatening to explode. Finally, Daniel yanked the last wire, twisting it into place. The core screamed. Blue light flared, surging upward like a wave. Then everything went dark. For a long, terrifying moment, silence hung in the chamber. Daniel thought he might have failed. Then slowly alarms began to blare. The entire ship trembled, systems collapsing one after another. On the view screens around the chamber, the fleet outside began to falter. Without the flagship's control, their coordination shattered. Ships veered off course, colliding with each other. Some turned their weapons on their own allies, while others fled in panic. Cheers erupted from the guards. Lysera lowered her blade, her crown glowing brighter than ever. She looked at Daniel, her eyes filled with fierce pride. "You did it," she said softly. Daniel leaned against the core, exhausted, but alive. "I really hope we're near an exit." They barely escaped the collapsing flagship. The strike vessel detached just as the giant ship tore itself apart, flames consuming its structure. The explosion lit the sky brighter than a second sun. From above, Daniel watched as the rest of the fleet broke apart, retreating in chaos. The Siege of Shadows was over. The city of Velora was saved. Back at the palace, the people gathered in the Grand Plaza. The damage was heavy. Towers broken, streets cracked, fires smoldering, but their spirits burned bright. For the first time in generations, they had faced an overwhelming enemy and survived. At the center of the plaza, Lysera stood on the high steps, her crown shining. Daniel stood at her side, still dusty from the battle. The crowd fell silent as she raised her hand. "People of Velora," she called, her voice strong. "We have endured the storm. We have defended our home, but we did not do it alone." She turned to Daniel. The entire plaza followed her gaze. This human, Daniel Cross, saw what we could not. Where our perfection failed, his creativity triumphed. Where we faltered, he stood. "He is more than an ally. He is my consort." The words echoed like thunder. Daniel froze. He had heard the nickname before, spoken in jest, shouted as an insult. But now the princess herself declared it as truth. The crowd erupted in voices. Some gasped in shock, some cheered with joy, some whispered in disbelief. But no one could deny what had happened. Without him, the city would have fallen. Lysera turned to Daniel, her expression calm but her eyes warm. "Do you accept this place beside me?" Daniel's throat tightened. He had never asked for this. He was just an engineer from Earth. But when he looked at the people, at their hope, their trust, their belief, he knew the answer. He took a deep breath and nodded. "I do." The crowd roared. That night, as the stars returned to the sky and the fire slowly died, Daniel stood on the palace balcony. Lysera joined him, her crown glowing faintly in the moonlight. "You changed everything," she said quietly. Daniel shook his head. "I just did what I could. Tried to fix what was broken." Lysera smiled. "That is why you are different. Others seek perfection. You embrace imperfection and turn it into strength. That is what makes you human. And that is why you are worthy." Daniel looked out at the city, at the people rebuilding, at the hope shining in their eyes. For the first time since arriving in this strange world, he felt like he truly belonged. And he knew that whatever came next, he would not face it alone because he was no longer just Daniel Cross, human engineer. He was Daniel Cross, consort of Velora, and humanity's story among the stars had only just begun.